Today, a Fulton County judge denied Donald Trump's co-defendant Kenneth Chesebro's motion to separate his case from co-defendant Sidney Powell and ruled that they both will go to trial together on October 23rd. The judge has not decided yet whether other defendants will be tried at that time. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis wants to keep the cases together and hold one trial for all defendants starting on that date, which Trump and other co-defendants oppose. Fani Willis's team told the court today that she will need 4 months to try the 19 defendants and that the trial will last for approximately 4 months. The judge seemed incredulous about that timetable, suggesting that, based on his estimation, the trial would last at least 8 months or more. And in breaking news today, Special Counsel David Weiss intends to bring an indictment against President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. And that indictment is expected to be brought by the end of this month. The development comes a month after Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed David Weiss as special counsel in his investigation of Hunter Biden, after a plea deal struck between Biden and federal prosecutors fell apart and the case appeared headed for trial. Former Vice President Mike Pence today delivered a sharp rebuke of his former governing partner's guiding philosophy, arguing that Donald Trump, who maintains a commanding polling lead over other Republicans.
Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for Black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of Black audiences are concerned about the lack of Black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the Black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% Black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black. Your Black. Your Black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest spot, shot with a rest spot, shot with a rest spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head. Yeah.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hope.
And this is Areva Martin in real time, and we are tracking today's trending and breaking news. Former Vice President Mike Pence delivered a sharp rebuke of Donald Trump, who continues to maintain a commanding polling lead over other Republican White House hopefuls. Pence said that Trump no longer hews to conservatism and has instead adopted the tone of a populist. Ava DuVernay is making history this year as the first African-American woman in the Venice Film Festival's 80-year existence to have a film compete for the Golden Lion. The film is called Origin, and this film chronicles the remarkable life and work of Pulitzer Prize-winning Arthur Isabel Wilkerson as she investigates the genesis of injustice and uncovers a hidden truth that affects us all. And in more news today, Trump has been deemed liable for defamation in the second E. Jean Carroll case. The judge in that case ruled that Carroll had already proven that Trump defamed her, and he ruled her impending civil trial will be solely based on damages. Also, Trump was warned that the FBI could search Mar-a-Lago again if he didn't comply with a subpoena for classified documents. The FBI ultimately searched the Florida estate in August of last year and recovered more than 100 classified documents, which led to criminal charges against the former president. And Florida is expected to approve a classical exam as a competitor, I should say, to the SAT. The Classic Learning Test, as it is called, emphasizes the Western canon and Christian thoughts. It's the latest move by Governor Ron DeSantis to shake up the education establishment. However, there's a lot of pushback. The College Board and the ACT say that there is little research that shows that this new test can accurately assess college readiness. And some classic scholars say that the test version or vision of classical education is too narrow. And others say this test is just simply too expensive. Today, I'm delighted to have with me two of my regular contributors. Katrina Robinson is here. She's a consultant and former Tennessee state senator. Also joining in this hour is Dr. Niambi Carter. She is a professor at the University of Maryland. And in hour two of Areva Martin in Real Time, that's the hour where we go deep and we dig behind the headlines on some of the biggest stories of the day. Now, some of these stories make big headlines and others have big impact. Today, we're talking about the status of reparations. Now, we know there have been a slew of local reparation programs all over the country and in some big states like California, but renewed hopes for an eventual national policy to compensate for slavery has been dimmed after decades of lobbying and 3 years of a national reckoning over race. Americans overall remain strongly opposed to the ideal of reparations. And when researchers began polling about it several years ago, they thought the biggest issue would be money. How would reparations be paid for? Or maybe even the issue of workability. How would you determine how to pay and to whom you would actually pay reparations to? But it turns out these are the smallest concerns among the 2/3 of Americans who say they're against cash payments. The plurality of Americans say they simply don't believe the descendants of slaves deserve reparations. Today, I'm going to be asking some experts, can the model used for reparations for Japanese Americans who'd been interned during World War II, can that same model be used to create a pathway for reparations for Black folks? Make sure you stick around for hour two. But before I bring on my contributors, here's what I'm thinking in real time. You know, the so-called law and order Republicans were called out today. the brother of fallen Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who died shortly after defending the Capitol on January 6th, sent a scathing letter to Republican leaders accusing the party of choosing lies and deceit over truth. Now, this is more than 2 years after the violent mob of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol. The letter said, instead of being a wake-up call for our nation to reflect on what unites us as a country, the insurrection simply widened the divide we have among our people. Sicknick said his family continues to be deeply affected by the death of his brother Brian, who was brutally attacked by rioters. The 42-year-old military veteran who worked for the Capitol for 12 years died a day later after suffering 2 strokes. Now, this letter was addressed to all members of the Republican Party and was sent directly to congressional leadership, Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. The letter calls out what he says are repeated attempts to downplay the insurrection. In the letter, it goes on to say that the party claims it is pro-law enforcement, but the actions of its leadership speak far louder than the false words they spew. He ended the letter with a warning about a party that continues to support Trump. He says continued worship of a seriously flawed narcissist who has called for the suspension of parts of the Constitution, at least when it suits him, will lead us to a very dark place for our nation, a place from which we may not recover. This is a letter, again, from the brother of Brian Sicknick, who lost his life as a result of the Capitol insurrection on January 6th. Bravo to him for having the courage to call out these coward lawmakers, Republicans who call themselves law and order legislators, who have defended the rioters, who have defended the insurrectionists, rather than stand in solidarity with the families of the fallen officers like Brian Sicknick. Now I want to bring on my contributors, Katrina Robinson and Dr. Niambi Carter. I want to talk about some of today's trending news, starting, Dr. Carter, with this news that Hunter Biden is going to be indicted. We know there were efforts made between David Weiss, before he was designated as special counsel. He was just a lawyer in the Department of Justice. He and Hunter Biden's lawyer, tried to work out a plea deal that would have spared Hunter Biden jail time. That deal blew up, and now David Weiss, who has been appointed as special counsel, says he's going to seek an indictment from a grand jury by the end of this month. What impact do you think that's going to have on the election of 2024 and Biden's campaign?
Well, we think about what happened about this computer when there wasn't an indictment. So I can only imagine that this is going to be amplified by Republicans primarily to talk about Joe Biden's fitness. This will be yet another thing that they will attempt to add to the roster. And I think, quite frankly, do a false equivalence between him and Donald Trump. Donald Trump's 4 indictments, Hunter Biden's 1 indictment. Hunter Biden's not running for the president. Nonetheless, right, since his father's at the top of the ticket, is likely going to be the Democratic nominee. I think we're going to see the Republicans talk about this, time and time again. I mean, we already had Tucker Carlson trotting out this nonsense story. I'm trying to be charitable about former President Barack Obama, and he's nowhere near the ticket. So I don't even want to know how badly this story is going to twist and turn throughout this election cycle, but it's not going to be good.
Yeah, we know that the Republicans are, as you said, trying to make this false equivalency between Hunter Biden and Donald Trump. And they're also trying to paint the entire Biden family as a corrupt family, which is really ridiculous when you think about how poor relative to most senators Joe Biden is, and the myriad of times that he's had to make financial disclosures as a senator, as a vice president, and as a president. But yet we know there will be many people repeating those talking points that the Biden family is somehow corrupt, even though despite the deals, we know Ivanka and Jared and so many others in the Trump family that benefited from him being president, including the president himself, who's on one big grift right now. as we speak. But this is going to be interesting to see how it impacts voters in the 2024 election. Katrina, let's talk about what happened in Georgia today. You're in the South. You're not in Georgia, I know, but you're in Tennessee. But this was the first televised hearing today of the defendants indicted in this sprawling RICO case brought by Fani Willis. We saw arguments for Chesebro and Sidney Powell, as well as the prosecutors from Fani Willis's office arguing over this separation. Kenneth Chesebro wanted to be separated from Sidney Powell, doesn't want to go to trial with any of these defendants. And the court basically denied that motion and said Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro will go to trial together. And then the prosecution stood up and said it's going to take 4 months to try 19 people. And courts not convinced about this. I don't know. Did you have a chance to watch the hearing? And what do you think the impact of these hearings being on television every day is going to make on the 2024 election?
Actually, Areva, I didn't get a chance to watch the hearing, but I did read about it. And I'm trying to figure out why Chesebro thought it was a good idea to ask for separation in this case. I mean, you are the deputy mastermind of the entire conspiracy. I mean, Powell was brought on as the person who basically spearheaded this conspiracy, and then the Trump team, the Trump legal team separated from him. She still continues to meet with Donald Trump. So you all are effectively tied together for the entire conspiracy. But I think us seeing this every day on the news is not going to be anything but a distraction from the election. It's really not the fodder that we need for the Republican Party, but it's more so for us as Democrats to have some type of satisfaction, because there's going to be no deviation from their support for Trump just based on these trials. To their base, it's just distraction for them. So they need to concentrate on what they need to do to get their nominee to the finish line. But for us, it's just content for us to watch. I don't think it's going to have any impact on the actual election.
You think, Dr. Carter? I mean, sometimes, obviously something can be played over and over and over to the point where people just tune it out, where it has no impact. But sometimes people can hear things and see things, and it can have an impact on how they view the world. If they start to see some of these lawyers arguing in court that their client didn't do it, and they all start pointing the finger at Donald Trump. And we see lawyer after lawyer taking the podium saying, my client was acting at the direction of Donald Trump. My client was acting at the direction of Donald Trump. And we hear that over and over and over again. Do you think that might have some impact, not on that 35% of Republican voters who are likely to, be loyal to Donald Trump until his death and their deaths, but the rest of the Republican Party and then some independents?
I mean, we would hope so. I mean, we would hope that it didn't take 4 indictments for people to even just start saying basic things like this person is unfit for duty. Yet we've seen this because Donald Trump has been coddled, and he has been assisted by his co-partisans who, may not have helped him in the conspiracy. I'm not suggesting that, but certainly did not offer any strong rebuke. They certainly didn't withdraw support. I mean, right now in the Republican field, you really only have about 2 candidates, maybe 3 now with Mike Pence, who've been really open in saying Donald Trump has been wrong. He is unfit. He shouldn't do this job again. And those people are receiving virtually no support. I'm talking about Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie, and now Mike Pence. And then you have others who are now getting some shine, like Vivek Ramaswamy, who is running to say that if he is convicted, he will offer him a pardon. So I would hope that people who consider themselves to be a legitimate political alternative in this country could do the very least and say that we care about democracy, we care about governance, we care about representation, even though we disagree about how to get there. And so there are some things that are just beyond the pale. But I think at this point, we can barely call this a political party anymore right now. I mean, it's not to suggest that Democrats are perfect, but I think we have seen an egregious lack of judgment and an unwillingness to just say a thing is a thing. It's corrupt. It's a problem. It's dangerous, right? And these people have fallen short every time and called it a partisan process, have said that this is a nothing burger, right? But we saw the January 6th hearings and all of that information compiled from law enforcement to fellow legislators and to others who were on staff and in and around the Capitol that day. And you still have other members of the party saying, not only do we not believe this, we're going to abdicate ourselves from our responsibility and not participate in this fact-finding mission, with the exception of two Republicans. Now Liz Cheney lost her job, right? And we're going to now have a second commission on a commission because we don't think that this was handled properly. And I just think it's disgusting, quite frankly. So I would call on their better angels. I just don't think they have any.
Yeah, and I hear you. And obviously the evidence is in your favor. Everything that we've seen to date suggests that you're right. But when you have Brian Sicknick, who is a white man, 12-year Capitol Police officer veteran who dies after the insurrection, and you have his brother, another white man, calling out the Republicans, Katrina, I'm getting a little encouraged that people, when this trial in Georgia gets played out on television, and people who have been impacted either because their loved ones are part of that 1,100 that has been indicted, whose lives have changed because now they have criminal charges. They may be incarcerated. They may have had to pay big fines. They might have been fired from their jobs. Or in the case of Brian Sicknick's brother, he lost his brother. I think there are going to be more people having just a visceral negative reaction to someone like a Donald Trump who says he wants to be president again. And it doesn't mean, I think, necessarily that they reject him, but I think the chaos of this could cause a lot of people to say, we need to move on. Like, this guy, maybe I don't want him to go to jail. Maybe I think this is the weaponization. We keep hearing that word by the lawyers, but I think it's going to be give people something to pause about and to maybe think twice about before voting for him. You have any hope that Brian Sicknick's brother's scathing letter might be the beginning of something different?
You know, Areva, I would hope so. I would hope that hearing that type of emotion, hearing that type of narrative about how this has affected his family and how Republicans are just turning a blind eye to what's right, I would hope that will wake up some type of compassion, some type of conscientiousness from his base, and just shy away from creating other situations that create a bigger divide among their party. I mean, they're already wrestling to try to figure out which line do they stand, which side of the line do they stand on. I just don't know if we're in a time where, with so much damage being done, if we're in a time where it will make that big of a difference to where people are in a position where they say, hey, we need to pivot, we need to go another direction and not beat this, but in other words, make sure that we have someone who is a respectable nominee, so that this is an actual election and not just some type of satire.
Yeah, and maybe not just Brian Sicknick's brother, but Mike Pence today, in his sharpest rebuke, again, that we've heard to date, he doesn't attack Trump for the indictments or January 6th, but he says Donald Trump has moved away, Dr. Carter, from what conservatism means, and that he's taken the party into this, this la-la land of populism that doesn't hew to conservative Republican values. And he's pleading for Republicans to return to the era of Ronald Reagan. Now, all of us on this show would probably agree that we don't have any love for that era of Ronald Reagan, but this is a way for Pence to say to the Republicans, look, if we are going to have a party, to your point, then the party needs to stand for something, and it needs to stand for something more than populism.
Well, I mean, I don't know that these people, I'm like, are they headless? Did they not know who this man was before they picked him? He's never been a conservative. Donald Trump has no allegiance, no values to anything other than himself and money. And that's pretty much it. So this idea that he moved the party hadn't been there for a while. Quite frankly, Donald Trump was able to capitalize on a moment in the Republican Party that had been building since the Tea Party movement. I mean, the party had been moving away from traditional conservative values almost since the time of integration. I mean, they were looking for an issue, right? I mean, the moral majority, all of that, they were looking for an issue. Their issue became abortion, and then they proselytized that and turned it into things around gay marriage and things around birth and all this stuff that Republicans before would have never touched because that's not what they cared about. So this party that claims that they have conservative values hasn't been conservative for a very long time. Certainly maybe since Reagan. I think some would argue maybe even a little before then. Donald Trump was just the latest iteration of this and might be the most perverse iteration of this, but he is directly reflected of the party and what they have created and what they have cultivated in their base for the very longest time, probably for at least 3 decades now, but certainly over the last 10, 20 years, put it on steroids. So this idea that he moved the party had been moving all along. He was just able to make some money out of it.
But do you think, Katrina, that message from Mike Pence that we need to return to something, a period in our history being conservatism, the history of conservatism, to Ronald Reagan and the policies of Ronald Reagan? Do you think, there is any home for that message? Will it resonate with any people who are registered Republicans? Because Ronald Reagan, was a very beloved president.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I think that's very smart of Pence because that's really what resonates right now. People are looking for something to cling to that kind of gives them the message of the old Republican Party. This is not the old Republican Party. Either you have the ones that support Trump or you have those who are really Republicans and really conservatives who believe in the Reagan era. So I think he's making a smart move as a candidate in campaigning, and it will resonate with some people who are more fans of Republican governing and not just the fodder and the sensationalism that we've seen over the past 8 years.
When we come forward, we're going to talk not only about Trump's looming criminal charges and problems and legal jeopardy, but Trump just got dinged by a judge in a civil case that could cost him millions and millions of dollars in damages. When we come forward, KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a red spot. Shot with a red spot. Shot with a red spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation in scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a red spot. Shot with a red spot. Shot with a red spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand
I'm back, and this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. And in this hour, we are tracking today's breaking and trending news with my expert contributors, Katrina Robinson, who is a consultant and former Tennessee State Senator, and Dr. Niambi Carter, who is a professor at the University of Maryland. In hour 2 of the show today, we are digging deep behind the headlines about reparations and asking experts why 2/3 of the country, in some studies even more, continue to oppose African Americans receiving reparations when this country has a history of providing reparations to other groups, including the Japanese following internment after World War II. What will it take to get America to not only acknowledge the original sin of slavery, but to atone for it? and have two experts in hour two helping us make sense of what's happening around the conversation about reparations. But in this hour, Dr. Carter, not only is Donald Trump facing 4 criminal indictments, the prospect that there's going to be another search of Mar-a-Lago by the special counsel Jack Smith, but today he got a really big slap on the wrist by a judge in E. Jean Carroll's sexual harassment defamation case. And the judge basically ruled, we don't need a trial. We don't need to have a bunch of witnesses come in to tell us what has already been proven, which is that Trump defamed her. Trump defamed her, meaning her, E. Jean Carroll. So a trial set in her case that was going to include a part of it, proving up liability, has now been ruled unnecessary by this judge. Just as let's just come in and talk damages. So we're going to have Donald Trump in a civil court. He may or may not show up. Civil cases, you don't have to show up. But it's likely that there's going to be a multi-million-dollar judgment against, again, the man who says he should be president again. Will this civil judgment, you think, have any impact on voters? That's the question I'm asking today. What's going to impact voters when it comes to Donald Trump?
Well, like you said, I mean, his tried and trues, they're going nowhere. I mean, I think the people who might be on the fence, people who might be, if he does become the eventual nominee, might just decide to stay home because they just couldn't stomach it. And I think that's probably more likely. I don't think people will switch their votes in the general election to Joe Biden. I just think that there will be a number of maybe on the fence Republicans, maybe more of these people who are conservative and care about fiscal issues rather than kind of what's happening in your bedroom kind of issues, will just stay home. Because this is not just this judgment, right? This is also a man who the judge is on the record saying, under the laws of the state of New York, you are a rapist, right? Mm-hmm. And again, this is the same man who said you could just grab women by their genitals. He has displayed a level of behavior that I think for a lot of people, including some of those women who very willingly voted for him in 2016, but said they would back away later, they might stay home. But again, I don't have a lot of faith because the fact that he's even still in the conversation, the fact that he could still be on the ballot means he could very well win. And I think that's something we didn't take seriously in 2016.
Oh, no doubt about it. We should not sleep on Donald Trump, nor should we expect, as you said, these lawsuits, whether they're civil lawsuits or civil judgments or even criminal convictions, to be the thing that defeats him. But I do think, Katrina, that, sometimes the drumbeat gets so loud, it may be difficult for some women, some of those white women that voted for Trump back in the 2016 election, to vote for him because of these civil judgments and findings by the court. We did have a lot of evidence that Donald Trump abused and assaulted women prior to 2016, but we didn't have judgments from, sitting district court judges determining that he was a rapist and he, being ordered to pay millions and millions of dollars in judgments because he had been effective in settling very quietly lawsuits against him with, confidentiality agreements. Are you thinking there might be some women who say, I don't know if I want to vote for a man as president who's a rapist?
I mean, we've seen recent polling that Trump has lost a lot of women from his base, and this is subsequent to several allegations, not just this particular summary judgment, but here you have a man who is a liar, who is a thief, who is a rapist, who has committed sins against every commandment you can think of in the Christian theological Republican Party. I mean, what will it take? But I think women will wake up and they will choose a better Republican candidate, a better Republican nominee. But I don't think it's past the point where they're going to hold their nose and just pick a candidate right now.
I'm so glad you brought that up because the Christian right, the evangelic Christians are going to have to go and pull a lever, push a button and convince themselves that the whole, court system is corrupt and that the judge is corrupt. You got to come up with all these excuses to allow them to have this plausible deniability, right? Because any good, upstanding Christian is not going to walk into a voting booth and vote for a rapist, is he? folks have daughters, they have wives, they have sisters and mothers. I have to imagine that that's going to have some impact. And I guess the question now is, who might benefit the most? These candidates that are running for the Republican nomination seem to be grouped together under, they're all in single digits other than Trump. Who do you think, Dr. Carter, might be the beneficiary of those women that Katrina said who were walking away from Trump? Doesn't appear to be Ron DeSantis. Everybody thought he was going to be the heir apparent. He, obviously has time, can turn things around, but right now it doesn't appear to be him.
I think the field is really underwhelming to most Republican voters. I mean, I know Vivek Ramaswamy is getting a lot of shine, but that's only because he says outlandish things. And he basically cribbed Obama, right, to sort of describe himself to that same audience. Actually, Chris Christie got after him with that. I think maybe Mike Pence. I don't think it's going to be Nikki Haley, even for those women voters. I think a lot of those same women don't want Donald Trump, but they don't see women as top of ticket kind of people. So I think the person who might generate a little heat out of this will be Mike Pence. And I think that's what he's trying to do. I mean, he's also been a governor. I mean, he's been in the White House, so he has that credibility. I mean, it's crazy to think that we can't even talk about a vice president as being credible as a candidate, or a former vice president, I should say. But it's also a rare instance when you have the person you served under also running for that same nomination. But I think the only person here that looks like they might have a chance is going to be Mike Pence. I don't think people like Chris Christie. I'm sorry. I don't think these people will vote for Vivek Ramaswamy, who I don't believe is a Christian. He has said things like we share the same values, but he's yet to say what those values are. I don't think they're going to pick him. I think he's too brown. His name sounds funny. It's interesting, but it's not what they're going to vote for. And I don't think it's going to be Asa Hutchinson. I don't think it's going to be, what's his name? Tim Scott? Absolutely not. And I don't think it's going to be Nikki Haley. So I just think Mike Pence, just by process of elimination.
Katrina, you've run campaigns. If you are the Biden administration, if you're Biden and Harris, what are you saying, if anything? So far, the president has been completely silent on Donald Trump's legal issues. Kamala Harris gave an interview while traveling abroad where she said Trump needed to be held accountable. That made big news. They're like, oh, the vice president broke with the president, and she's now commenting on Trump. But as someone who's run a campaign, do you think the strategy of the White House in not making any comments on the legal issues, be the criminal or civil, is the best strategy?
I think at this point in the campaign, that is the best strategy for Biden. It's not his time to do that, especially given what's happening with Hunter. And I think there's an undercurrent of them trying to create some type of collusion theory between the president's office and the VP's office in helping Hunter kind of carry out his wrongdoings. So I think it's probably the smartest thing to do at this point in the campaign. But once we get closer, he will have to address that.
When we come forward, I want to talk about what addressing Trump's legal issues look like for you, someone who's run for office before. And I want to talk about this new classical exam as a competitor to the SAT tests that are typically given to kids who are preparing to enter college. Is this the way to go? And what impact will it have on diverse students who are applying for colleges? Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley, weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon, on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
We are tracking today's trending and breaking news. And in hour 2, we are talking about reparations and why so many Americans oppose reparations for African Americans. Researchers thought the issue would be money. But contrary to that assumption, it seems like majority of Americans say that Black folks just don't deserve to be compensated for the vestiges of slavery. Talk about how, if there's anything that can be done to change those attitudes, and is there a pathway forward for reparations for descendants of slaves? But in this hour, we're talking about Joe Biden's decision to not talk about Donald Trump's legal issues, whether it's his criminal charges that have been filed against him, the 91 criminal charges, or these recent civil decisions that basically deem him a rapist. We know Eugene Carroll has already won a $5 million judgment against Donald Trump, and looks like she's going to probably double, if not triple, that amount once there's a trial on her second defamation case, since she has now won a summary judgment motion in that case. Katrina, you said it's the right thing for Biden not to be talking about Donald Trump's legal issues, but he says there's going to come a time. When is that time? And then what does it look like when the time is right for him to draw a distinction between him, i.e. Biden, who's never been charged with a crime, and his opponent, who has been charged with 91 criminal acts?
Well, that's the thing, Areva. He's not yet his opponent. So we have to look at it from that perspective. Even though we know he is, he's technically opponent. And so at this time, when we're talking about how we address campaign messaging in times like this, we all know in media training, one of the things you learn is if you don't say anything about it, no one can ask you a question about it. So if you don't want to be asked about Hunter Biden, if you don't want to be asked about the possibility of you being in collusion with your son to commit criminal acts, then the best thing for you to do is not to address Donald Trump. Leave that for his opponents to do that at this time. He's not his opponent at this time. At the time that he becomes his opponent, then yes, it's appropriate for him to broach that subject. But right now, that's between Trump and Pence and DeSantis, certainly not Vivek, but it's between him and his opponents at this time.
Yeah, Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson both have been very vocal in talking about Trump being unfit for office because of these criminal charges. Let's switch gears quickly, Dr. Carter, something I'm sure you're very interested in, and this is Florida. This is the state that has rejected AP studies for Black history. This is the state that had some weird issue even with AP psychology courses because there was some small part of the course that talked about sexuality and the possibility of what to do, I guess, when folks identify as gay. But this is a state under Ron DeSantis that has said it's going to approve this new test, classical exam, which really focuses on and emphasizes, Christian theology, and use it really in place of the SAT, which has been used for decades for kids who are entering college. What do you think of this test? And DeSantis is being, I think, the first state in the union to adopt this exam for its students.
Well, look, I think it'll be a boon for the schools that accept it. But the truth is College Board is a known brand. The SAT is accepted everywhere. And if you are taking this test or as an option for your kid, you're essentially limiting the kinds of places they will be able to go. Most of the places that accept this are small religious institutions that don't necessarily offer the same broad appeal. And I get why these schools would take this exam. One, it fits with their mission, but two, these are often schools that are sometimes losing students. So it makes sense why they signed on to this, because essentially they can be a conduit, right, for all these students in Florida who may not have, quite frankly, a healthy state college or university system to continue to go through or to matriculate into, because DeSantis has, I think, really undermined the health of Florida universities. And for students who want to maybe go away, but because they're taking this test in place of the SAT, won't be able to go to other kinds of 2- and 4-year institutions because they don't accept this education or this test of education. I don't know exactly what's supposed to be on it. I know who they say they can read to participate in this test. But I just think it's a short-sighted process. I don't know if he takes care of this the way they took care of homeowners insurance in the state of Florida. This won't last very long. So it may be a something that we don't have to concern ourselves with for a very long time. But I just think it's, picking these kinds of fights and battles that are really limiting to the children and the students of the state of Florida. That's the real disservice here.
Yeah, and Katrina, this seems like, again, another part of Ron DeSantis' culture wars. Let me go out and find a super conservative, Christian-focused, Christian-based organization and have them administer a test to the students of Florida because their ideology, their Christian theology better aligns with his conservative Christian principles. How much involvement do you think, as a former legislator, it seems like Ron DeSantis is awfully involved in the weeds, I would even say, with the education of the students of Florida, rather than leaving these really big educational decisions to the educators? Is this how legislators or lawmakers or executive, I guess he's a member of the executive branch as governor, but, have you seen this happen in your state where you have these legislators putting their hands into things where, they're not necessarily equipped to do so?
Absolutely. What DeSantis is doing is part of the larger educational freedom movement. So basically, in the same vein of private school vouchers or tax credits for homeschoolers, it's all in that undercurrent of people who want to homeschool their children to keep them away from those things like critical race theory, those types of issues. Those are things that you've seen addressed in legislatures all across the southern states. I'm just surprised that DeSantis is the first one to bring this instead of Greg Abbott. I would have expected that from him. But again, this being an election season, I'm not surprised to see that from DeSantis. He often gets in the weeds on things like this. But yes, it has been a regular occurrence in our legislatures that they are delving into education issues that aren't really that of the public, but more of a private nature.
Yeah, and I can't help but think, Dr. Carter, what impact it's going to have on students. So are we going to have a nation where if you grow up in the South, your education is going to look very different than those kids who grow up in the northern part of this country? Because the southern states, as Katrina said, are so involved in trying to manipulate the curriculum to avoid teaching so many important facts, so many important lessons, that we're going to have a bunch of kids who have no clue about maybe even someone like Rosa Parks, who she is, versus their northern counterparts.
Maybe, but I would say it's not going to be limited to the South for long, because when you look at places like Ohio, Northern Virginia, and places where you wouldn't expect this, these same kind of fights are happening on smaller levels. I think you have states that may not go as far as a Florida and other places, but I think you're going to see it more commonly. And yes, it will create this sort of two-tiered educational system where people will have certain information or knowledge. I'm even thinking about what those kids look like in my classrooms in another 10 years when we're talking about things that I would assume are common knowledge, but they don't know, or they were taught in a very particular, very narrow kind of way what these things mean and what they can mean. I think it's really unfortunate for these kids, because what it is to Katrina's point, is about adults trying to flex their political muscles and exert their power in these ways that are not just about education, because it's never just about education. It's always about white supremacy in my mind, right? That's ultimately what this is about. Upholding white supremacy. And I just think it's going to be an unfortunate situation, because we're essentially telling these young people they don't have the capacity to process complex conversations and difficult conversations. And we're going to be poorer for it. They're going to be poorer for it, because we won't be educating whole citizens, which is sort of the role of public education anyway.
But that's the goal of white supremacists also.
Oh, for sure.
Is to keep people ensure that their access to knowledge and information is limited, and that information that they are afforded access to is very, structured and is very consistent with their limited view of the world. Real quickly, Katrina, some states are seeing large numbers of their professionals leave because of these laws. Has that happened in Tennessee? Have you seen that kind of drain of, the brain trust because professors feel stifled?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Are folks leaving these states because they can't take it? Like, I can't work in Florida because I can't teach kids the true Black history.
Oh. No. I haven't seen that yet. But again, this is very new. Even us passing critical race theory is very, very new. And I think we haven't really seen the brunt or the fallout of it all yet. But once we start to see that happen, where people are being stifled from what they can educate our children on, you will see an attrition, just like we're seeing in the healthcare space with the abortion laws.
Mm-hmm.
We are out of time. Great response. And thank you so much, Katrina Robinson. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thank you, Dr. Niambi Carter. Also,
thank you, Areva.
Always a pleasure to have you on. And in hour 2, we're talking about reparations. Is there a pathway forward? Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety